Welcome to Grappling with Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to welcome my guest for today. With me is Stewart Wiggins, who's Chief Advisor at Induna Advisors, working to significantly increase company revenue by developing positive client reports and establishing solid business relationships. And Ebek Williamson, who is an insight coach, meditation teacher, speaker, author, and change master who helps people initiate. I think I'm supposed to have more to that description.
Initiate change.
There we go.
Initiate and navigate change.
Let's always check your notes before you go live. Well, thank you both for being with me. And here is today's ethics challenge, a true story. A couple went out to dinner together. They ordered a variety of appetizers and shared them. A couple of hours later, after returning home, the wife became extremely ill, vomiting so violently that the husband felt compelled to call 911. An ambulance arrived together with a fire truck and took them to the emergency room, where they spent 6 hours as the doctors attempted to treat the wife for what they believed to be food poisoning. In a state of agitation, the husband sent an email to the restaurant informing them that their food had made his wife seriously ill, and he identified the one appetizer his wife had eaten that he hadn't. He also informed them the cost of the ambulance was over $600 and implied that they should offer to pay the expense. 48 hours later, he had received no reply, so he sent the same message to the restaurant's Instagram account. He never received a reply to the second communication either. Subsequently, tests came back confirming that the wife had not been sick from food poisoning at all, but from a virulent stomach flu. Considering that the doctors initially diagnosed the wife with food poisoning, was the husband wrong to send the initial email? Was the restaurant wrong to ignore the message? Considering that the restaurant did not reply, should the husband follow up with a note apologizing for his false accusation? The floor is open.
Do you want to go first, Stewart?
No, you go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So, well, there are quite a few things happening here. First of all, the husband, as a reaction to what happened, without even having facts in front of him, takes action and sends this email. Does he know that it is a fact, it's true that his wife had a food poisoning, and even if so, it was stemmed from their dinner in that restaurant? Does he know for it 100% that it is? No, not yet. But he goes ahead and sends that email. On the other hand, even though it's been quite some time, it's been over 48 hours, and even though he sends 2 messages, he doesn't hear anything back. So I think in this situation, both parties are in some kind of fault, because I would think the restaurant, no matter what, as a business, need to acknowledge and send a response stating that they are sorry for what happened, regardless it might have caused by their food or not, and ask for more information maybe. But they didn't do that. And on the other hand, it turns out it wasn't food poisoning. And then should the husband send a message and apologize? Well, I wouldn't send anything else, because there's nothing to says that it was the restaurant, and it's obviously not the restaurant food. So, and they didn't respond. So why would he need to write them back and apologize? If they responded, then yes, I would think it would be kind to send an apology message. What do you think, Stuart?
Well, I think that and I agree with everything you've said.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that the husband's initial reaction in the operative word was agitated. He's agitated because his wife was upset and he expected a response. If you're in a customer service type business, it's important to have some sort of crisis management training. And when you've been trained in crisis management, you develop what's known as must-stare points,
Mhm.
so that you get your argument or your response out there in a very constructive manner. Okay. I don't think that there is any mandate to get it out within 24 hours. I don't have any problem with 24. 48 is pushing the envelope in terms of a response. But the response is never a acknowledgement that there was guilt involved. So you're right, sorry your wife became ill. But I wouldn't make any reference to the food or other customers because you don't know about other customers. In fact, the cycle time to actually determine whether it was food poisoning or a stomach virus proves out in the narrative, because that's when he found out that she actually had a stomach virus.
Mhm.
I think the rub for the restaurant is that they didn't respond. Some sort of response with you, just 3 must-stare points. Okay. Sorry your wife was sick. And I would have to develop what the 3 would be. But if you own a restaurant or you own any business, you have sort of like a canned group of must-stare points, things that you want to say, so that you're not making it up and it's vetted through your legal team, so that you don't say something that is that can get you in trouble legally down the line. These cases are very difficult to win. I'll give you an example. Chipotle. They literally almost got shut down, but they had numerous cases around the country, and they've changed their way of preparing and storing food because they had so many. But a one-off case of sickness in one restaurant, it's difficult to prove. So to answer your question, I think that the husband responded because of his agitation and his love for his wife. I think the restaurant, going past 48 hours, is a little bit arrogant on their part.
Yeah.
When the doctors said that it was food poisoning, it'd be interesting to know, did they say that conclusively and turn out to be wrong? Did they presume that that probably was the cause? Because that would also weigh in to whether or not it was appropriate for him to send the initial email. But I think the point that you're making, Stuart, and following up Yvek's point, is that customer service, we used to have an expression in this country, I haven't heard it for a while, that the customer is always right. And, of course, there are limits to that, but to be responsive, you had a patron in your establishment who suffered possibly because of your service, but even if it had nothing to do with you, to simply show the empathy. We're really sorry that your wife has gotten ill. We have had no other reports of any similar symptoms from our other customers. We would be interested in hearing further reports to determine if there might be some other cause. And we would like you to know that however you would phrase it at that point, that we recognize the difficult you're going through, and hope we will keep in touch to be updated on your wife's progress. Something to that effect that just shows concern, shows empathy. That the whole issue of ghosting today, simply ignoring people, because we don't want to be bothered being involved, whether it's we're worried about liability, or we want to avoid uncomfortable conversations, or we simply don't want to expend the time and effort.
So you said something interesting there. You said liability. Because we're such a litigious society,
Yes.
does that position, because I made the comment earlier that you don't want to say anything that somebody could use against you later
Right.
on. So does that, in this case, does that create the ghosting that you talk about?
Well, but then again, if you mentioned training, to simply have some sort of a policy or a rubric in place where you have trained people with the phrasing, you have it written down somewhere. This is the email you send if somebody calls complaining about damages.
Having
or you
a
express
standard
empathy
operating
without
procedure.
admitting any guilt. Yeah,
Yeah, having a standard operating procedure on if something happens, and it happens, it happens in anywhere, for any restaurant, this could happen. And I 100% agree with Stewart. There must be processes in place whenever this kind of thing happens, while keeping the liability checked, like intact, giving a response and acknowledging, validating, like showing empathy that we are sorry for what you are going through, regardless of why it happened, and we would love to hear more from you and go from there. And if I were in that husband's place, I would really wait to send that email in the first place. Though, let me tell you this, Ipek of 10 years ago, like 10 years ago, me, I would do the same. I would act right away. But now I'm so much more in a calm and peaceful space that I always wait and see. First, get the facts. Is this true? Am I 100% sure that it's true? First, bring the facts in front of myself and then go from there. If the facts are without a doubt saying that this is the case, then go ahead. Not even send an email, call the restaurant. I would do that.
So if I was representing the family, one of the questions I would ask is, has anyone on your staff had a stomach flu in the last week? Particularly people that handle food. So if you wanted to make a case out of it, did a food handler pass this on through a piece, spittle, whatever, that landed on the food that made this woman sick? But it's interesting to me that the husband, his first thought was that I'm going to send this letter off because I'm angry, and it's not always somebody's fault. Let's not assign blame to this. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure the wife would have welcomed to feel better than to have her husband chase this restaurant looking for money to pay for an ambulance. I don't mean to be cavalier about it, but these things sometimes happen. And, as I said earlier, I think the restaurant needs to prepare itself with a response. I mean, as I sat here and hear you both talk, I'm thinking, okay, I'd have a response that basically says, I'm sorry for your discomfort. We welcome your patronage. We certainly welcome you to come in. And this is not an acknowledgement of any guilt on our part, but we would certainly like to comp you an appetizer for remaining loyal to us at some time in the future when you and your wife are physically able to. And you put that in your response.
Yeah, definitely offering a gift always is a good approach for sure.
Yeah, and even that, I mean, that sometimes it's a matter of timing. If people are in a state of agitation, they may feel like you're trying to buy them off with something insubstantial. There's so much that goes into gauging the proper response. But as you say, Stewart, sometimes things just happen. And because we do live in this litigious society, which is also becoming an increasingly an entitlement culture, where a victim culture, it's always someone's fault. There's always someone to blame. There's always someone who should pay. And that doesn't really serve us. It puts us at odds with one another. And it makes it easier for us to try to absolve ourselves of responsibility or absolve ourselves of the mindset that sometimes things just happen that are unpleasant, uncomfortable. And it's not always in anyone's interest to try to find blame.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you think about the time it takes to do the test, I mean, the doctor initially didn't even think about the fact that it might be a stomach bug. Automatically went to the fact that it was food poisoning. This is why they call it practicing medicine, because they don't know the answer. So they're still practicing, trying to determine what the answer is. But once they had more facts and found out that it was a stomach flu, that's when that information goes to the husband. In fact, if the husband wanted to be a real stand-up person, they should send a note. If in fact they did send the initial note and say, I apologize, turns out my wife had the stomach flu, but he loses all credibility because he went to Instagram first. Is once you put it on social media, any leverage that he thought he had in this manner, I think is diminished, because now you've put it out there for the world to see. You can't take it back, because people will see the initial letter, but half the people won't see the apology. So now that half of the people that didn't see the apology, they think this is a bad restaurant. They don't want to go there to eat. So I think you need to just don't get ahead of your skis there, and manage your emotions no matter how agitated. And I'm like you, 10 years ago, my head would have exploded. A little calmer now.
And now, to be fair, I don't know whether he posted on Instagram or whether he direct messaged them. So it may not have been that he went public. But let's shift to talk about his response now. In other words, he felt entirely justified at the time, and perhaps might have been prudent to wait, but there might have been justification based on what he knew, what he was told. And he might have felt legitimately that the restaurant was negligent or unresponsive, unprofessional, because it didn't respond. And now that he discovers he shouldn't have sent the letter in the first place, does he say, well, since they chose not to respond, I have no obligation to follow up with an apology? Or does he say, it was still my mistake, and therefore, regardless of the restaurant's behavior, I should really own the mistake that I made?
May I go?
Absolutely.
So that's what I would do. I would still send a message, even though I don't hear from them, because I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for myself.
Yes.
To stay within my integrity, stating that I sent you these messages and you didn't respond. I wish you would, but it turns out it wasn't because of the food. It was something else, and most probably it wasn't related to your restaurant. And I would apologize. I would. Like, you don't have to do that, but it's between you and yourself, how you feel.
I think that's a perfect way to phrase it.
Yeah.
That we have two levels of calculation here. One is what we owe the other person, and the other is what we owe our own integrity.
I think it's really important. And I love what you said there. You know, at the end of the day, you feel better because you made the apology. You know, and I think in day and age today, people are so unwilling to just admit, and I won't say wrong, but I miscalculated. And I just like to let you know that, you know, I read the situation incorrectly. That's really, as we talk about this, that's really where the struggle is. I won't say the husband was too arrogant, but he lacked the ability or the integrity to say, I made a mistake and I was wrong. I mean, I would hope that he didn't whip the letter off to them within the first 48 hours, because within 48 hours, his wife was probably feeling better and they probably had the test results from the doctor. So if he'd have just waited, he wouldn't have had to send anything off at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he expect. If he thought he was going to get his $600 back for the ambulance, that wasn't going to happen without litigation. You know, no restaurant owner is going to pony up the $600. I mean, because even if it wasn't food poisoning, it could have been, as I said, one of the preparers or handlers was sick. It could have been a food allergy that was unknown. I mean, there are people, I'll give you an example. My mother became allergic to shellfish later in life, and she never had been before. You know, so then we had to run her to the hospital, but nobody said, oh, we need to sue the restaurant. But that was 25 years ago. I mean, that just doesn't happen today. So at least as I think about this whole thing and overview, I think everybody just needs to take their time, you know, and maybe the restaurant was wrong as they took too long, but by them not responding right away and not acknowledging any guilt, they saved themselves some trouble down the line.
And I think that I agree with you, Stewart. And the person who initiated this whole thing was the husband. So he started it, and so he needs to conclude it, like I would. But on the other hand, if the restaurant even had an automatic reply system to the email, if it just said, we received your email and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Even if this would happen in the first place, even though 48 hours passes, then knowing that they received his message, he wouldn't maybe need to go to Instagram and send a message through there. Or when after 48 hours, he found out that it wasn't even food poisoning. So he wouldn't be this agitated. It would come like lower the stress level for the husband.
As they say, time heals all wounds.
Of
And
course.
wounds all heals.
Yeah.
You know, you both said something that made me chuckle inside, that 10 years ago you would have reacted much differently. And you know, I could publish a small book of letters that I wish I hadn't sent so hastily. I think it's a small book and not a large book. But actually,
this is a great book title. The letters that I wish I didn't send.
Don't press send.
I'd rather edit it than write it, though. Collate it or curate it. I mean, some of them ended up getting me in trouble for a variety of different reasons. You know, sometimes because they were private letters that were made public to make me look bad. Others times because I simply was too impetuous, and you know, sometimes I knew I should show it to somebody, but it just felt so good sending it. But then, even if in a case like the husband's, where perhaps based on what he knew, he may have concluded that he was absolutely in the right. But there's still an object lesson there, because being sure is not the same as being right. And sometimes we can be 100% sure and still be dead wrong. So the humility of recognizing that there may be information that we're not privy to at this point.
So what you're saying is he made a decision based on the wrong set of facts.
Yeah, which
So
he had every reason to believe.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's okay to have an opinion, but at least use the correct set of facts to express your opinion.
Right, but the more meta point here is that we have to make sure that the facts that we know are right are in fact right.
Mhm.
And that goes certainly into our political discussions,
Yes.
but into every aspect of our lives. But so much of it, and I think that this really comes to the heart of the conversation, is the communication. To communicate quickly or timely, let's say. Sometimes it means having patience. Sometimes it means responding promptly.
Mhm.
To adopt the right tone. Right? Not necessarily admitting guilt, but always showing empathy and concern and consideration. And to be open to possibilities that we don't have the information that we need, but that we're willing to do what's necessary to address the situation as best we can.
There's very few situations, regardless if it's this or anything else, where an instant response is the correct response. Most situations are better handled to take some time and review. I mean, I've owned a business and I would coach my team on this. I've led large organizations and I would coach the team on this, because if you respond right away, then I think that you will, I'm not necessarily going to say regret, but you wish that you would have repositioned your response if you'd taken some time to analyze it. I'll put it like that.
Absolutely. I think exactly that way. And when I said 10 years ago, I would respond right away. And I did so many times in the past that I regretted afterwards, or I found out by myself that, oh, I was wrong. I sent this message without having all the facts. So when people say sleep on it, they have a point. Sleep on it, and then tomorrow revise it.
And I've read that statistically, scandals often happen late in the day. I mean, decisions that lead to scandals often happen late in the day because of what's called decision fatigue, that we have to make many decisions through the course of the day. And the later it gets, the more depleted we are. And therefore, if there's a big decision, as you say, you have to sleep on it, to come at it fresh the next morning. And sometimes just give it time. If I'm agitated.
Unfortunately, that's embedded in me because I'm a procrastinator by nature. So I'm always going to wait till the next day.
There's a good side to everything.
Exactly. Being a procrastinator in this setting, it's good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They say that Steve Jobs famously wore the same clothes every day, the black turtleneck and the jeans, because he wanted to minimize the number of choices he had to make. Yeah. And by not having to think about what to put on in the morning,
one less decision.
One less decision to sap his decision-making reservoir of energy.
Well, that does take a lot of time. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, I was wearing a tie every day, and that was easy, a shirt and a tie. But now that everybody's like business casual, that's a decision. Are these the pants? Is this the shirt? Is this the jacket? A shirt and a tie. And I was in the military for almost 10 years. That was really easy. You just had to look at it and see what's the uniform of the day. That's one less decision you have to make.
Yeah, and I mean, I do the suit and the tie and the white shirt. So I don't have a lot of choices to make, but I tend to put the tie out the night before. Because it's just one less step in the morning when I'm getting myself together, and using these types of psychological tricks to make our own lives easier is going to give us a little more resource, a little more on our side to strengthen us, to fortify us
You know, it'd be interesting to know what the actual chronological age was of the husband. Because
Mhm.
each of us have kind of said that as we've gotten older, we would approach it differently.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to know if the husband was like in his like 35. If he was 65, would he have approached the situation differently? We don't know the age, so we don't know. But if you use this small sample size, the three of us, then perhaps we would have waited before we responded.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, as we get older, we appreciate the wisdom of Shaw that youth is wasted on the young. And of course, young people, they look at us and they wonder, what is wrong with these old people? They just don't get it.
Mm.
Little do they realize that we don't think we're old.
Well, that's another conversation. When do we start feeling we're adults? That's something I'm still waiting for.
Exactly.
All right, any final thoughts before we go?
Well, it was, as always, very interesting topic. Yonason, I love your the topics that you come up with. It's always really exciting and amazing time to spend with you guys and with your guests, interesting guests, and lovely to meet you, Stewart.
That's what I'd say is the best part, is meeting new people and hearing their perspective. I enjoy this because it creates what I like to call intellectual agility. Because even though we knew the topic, it forces you to actually listen to somebody, to hear what they have to say before you respond. I mean, too often people just want to jump in and just, do a data dump. But this forces you to listen to people. So I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the meeting new folks. And I look forward to any other opportunities you want to include me in this.
Well, I can virtually guarantee that you will both be joining me again. And I do like the phrase intellectual agility. Sometimes they call it ethical agility, which is why I sometimes call myself the ethics ninja, because that the complexities, the grays, the shadows, when it's black and white, it's pretty easy. But most of life is not in the black and white. And so that's why we are here, to grapple with the gray. So I thank you both, Stewart Wiggins, David Williamson. Appreciate very much your insights and your comments. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you would like to propose a scenario or a dilemma, please go to yonasongoldson.com. Use the contact information there, submit your suggestion, and if it's compelling, we will definitely take it up. Otherwise, we look forward to having you join us on future episodes where we grapple with the gray.